Okay, this is take 2. The little pedestal went over. So anyway, good to be back with you again. Like I said, in the other one that fell over, the bags under my eyes are from not sleeping well. I still chew my nails. I've painted them today green and gold. The ticking over there is my clock because I have a pie in the oven. And we're going to read Make Way for Ducklings, the other book by Robert McCloskey. So I don't know why I haven't been sleeping well. It's just something that happens around the change of time. So anyway, I had a little bit before I fix supper because the pie takes an hour. So I thought I would read to you this book, Make Way for Ducklings. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live, but every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. There were sure to be foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles, so they flew on. This book doesn't waste any time. This is your copyright page, and the story starts there. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard. When they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. There was a nice pond in the public garden with a little island on it. The very place to spend the night, quacked Mr. Mallard, so down they flapped. There's their little island. They're in Boston. Next morning, they fished for their breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond, but they didn't find much. You know how ducks do it, and they swim along and bottoms up. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on its back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite. The big bird was too proud to answer, but the people on the boat threw peanuts into the water, so the Mallards followed them all round the pond and got another breakfast, better than the first. This is their boat ride, and there's a swan, and this guy is the controls of the boats are probably back there. Mr. Mallard's quacking hello. "I like this place," said Mrs. Mallard as they climbed out on the bank and waddled along. "Why don't we build a nest and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be better?" "Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted that at last Mrs. Mallard had found a place that suited her. Yeah, they are enjoying things. What do you think's going to happen with this boy racing along on his bike? But "Look out!" squawked Mrs. Mallard all of a dither. "You'll get run over." And when she got her breath, she added, "This is no place for babies with all those horrid things rushing about. We'll have to look somewhere else." Sure enough, he flew past. "Oh, Mr. Mallard, weep. That's no place to raise babies." So they flew over Beacon Hill and round the State House, but there was no place there. There's a view above the city. A statue down there. There's no place to raise babies. They looked in Lewisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. Yeah, there's a nice gated little park there, but there's no water. Just face it, a city is just no place for ducks. Then they flew over the Charles River. "This is better," quacked Mr. Mallard. "That island looks like a nice quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public garden." "Yes," said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. "That looks like just the right place to hatch ducklings." They're looking at this island here across the river. They're flying, and there's a nice bridge there people can drive across. So they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest. And only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt. Molt is when they lose their flying feathers. They have to get new feathers growing back in. All their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. So there's Mr. Mallard seeing what there is to see. Oh, he's on this page, sorry. Mrs. Mallard is on her nest. There's something interesting here on the little island. It looks like somebody threw a chair out, but they finally found themselves a little place. But of course they could swim, and one day they swam over to the park on the riverbank, and there they met a policeman called Michael. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that the Mallards called on Michael every day. Here they are getting some peanuts. Michael's a bit of a roly-poly policeman, but he's nice enough to give them peanuts. And that's what they like. Animals don't care what you look like. They only care that you're nice to them and the tone of voice that you speak to them in. If you say, "Oh, you are a dumb dog," that dog, no matter what you said to it, is going to come up to you because it's your tone of voice. But if you say, "You're a very good dog," that dog's going to shy away, put its tail between its legs. We tried this experiment on the dog we had when I was growing up. We got her when I was 5, and she was around till I was almost, so I was about 18 or 19, we had her. And she responded to the tone of our voice. So it doesn't matter what Michael looks like in this picture. He was nice to them, and that's what the ducks like. And they decided to call on him every day because they got the nuts. After Mrs. Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go to visit Michael anymore because she had to sit on the eggs to keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water or to have her lunch or to count the eggs and make sure they were all there. There she is. You see all those eggs she's got? And here's Mr. Mallard over here. He probably just came from a nice swim or going to see Michael, and he's grooming himself. One day the ducklings hatched out. First came Jack, then Cack, and then Lack, then Mack and Knack, and Whack and Pack and Quack. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were bursting with pride. It was a great responsibility taking care of so many ducklings, and it kept them busy. It's Whack, O-U-C-K. There's Mama and the babies, and Papa. Look at this one looking up at him. It's cute when somebody writes little stories that tell you how parents of animals react toward their children, whereas we, as bigger people, as humans, we act that way toward other humans, and we're giving the same personalities to animals, and you never know. One day, Mr. Mallard decided he'd like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like further on. So off he set. "I'll meet you in a week in the public garden," he quacked over his shoulder. "Take good care of the ducklings." "Don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children." And she did. There's Papa going out for a swim. Look, somebody's got a bottle in there. And there's the little ones. Bye. You think little animals, when their daddy or mommy goes away, they say bye? She taught them how to swim and dive. Here's the big picture. Swim and dive. Somebody's got bottoms up there. She taught them to walk in a line, to come when they were called, and to keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. She's a very smart mother. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's all 8 babies. She taught them to come when they were called. When at last she felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, "Come along, children, follow me." Before you could wink an eye, Jack and Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack fell into line, just as they had been taught. Mrs. Mallard led the way into the water, and they swam behind her to the opposite bank. There she's swimming, and there's all the babies following her. They're very obedient ducklings. Then they waded ashore and waddled along till they came to the highway. There they all are. Looks like this one's trying to rush. You think they're going to have a good time crossing the road? Mrs. Mallard stepped out to cross the road. Honk, honk went the horns on the speeding cars. Quack went Mrs. Mallard as she tumbled back again. Quack, 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 quack went Jack, cack, lack, mack, knack, whack, pack, and quack, just as loud as their little quackers could quack. The cars kept speeding by and honking, and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings kept right on quack, quack, quacking. Here's the big picture, and there she is. They're honking, and there's all the little ducklings. They're going quack. They made such a noise that Michael came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. Remember Michael? He fed Mr. and Mrs. Mallard peanuts. So here he is running. Tweet goes his whistle. And there's Mrs. Mallard and the babies. They said, "Let us cross the road." Michael sees they need some help. He planted himself in the center of the road, raised one hand to stop the traffic, and then beckoned with the other, the way policemen do, for Mrs. Mallard to cross over. And here she is with all her little babies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep, they're all there. That one's in a hurry again. Michael remembered Mrs. Mallard. As soon as Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings were safe on the other side and on their way down Mount Vernon Street, Michael rushed back to his police booth. Here he is. He's rushing back. And where is Mrs. Mallard? She and the babies are right there. They've got across the street safely. Yay! He called Clancy at headquarters and said, "There's a family of ducks walking down the street." Clancy said, "Family of what?" "Ducks," yelled Michael. "Send a police car, quick." Meanwhile, Mrs. Mallard had reached the corner bookshop and turned onto Charles Street with Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack, all marching in line behind her. Here she is. She's at the corner bookshop. This guy's peeking out the... Look at this one. He's always in the line. Oh, there's my timer. But pies always need another minute or two, so we can finish our story. Everyone stared. An old lady from Beacon Hill said, "Isn't it amazing?" And the man who swept the street said, "Well now, ain't that nice?" And when Mrs. Mallard heard them, she was so proud she tipped her nose in the air and walked along with an extra swing in her waddle. She has an extra swing in her waddle. There she is. She's proud. And you can see most of them underneath the car. Oh, this one's the last one in the line. He's in a hurry again. When they came to the corner of Beacon Street, there was the police car with 4 policemen that Clancy had sent from headquarters. The policemen held back the traffic so Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings could march across the street. So here's the picture. You've got 1, 2, 3. Oh, the other guy's hiding behind the car. And you got the 4 policemen, and there's Mrs. Mallard and all your little baby ducks crossing the street. Right into the public garden. There they go. They made it. You think Daddy's there? Inside the gate, they all turned around to say thank you to the policeman. The policeman smiled and waved goodbye. Wasn't that nice? There's all the little babies and Mama. Thank you. Quack, quack, quack. When they reached the pond and swam across to the little island, there was Mr. Mallard waiting for them, just as he had promised. There he is. He's on the rock. There's Mama. And guess who's in a hurry again? A swan. The ducklings liked the new island so much that they decided to live there. All day long they follow the swan boats and eat peanuts. There's the big picture. But there's the swan boat, and you can see them all there. The two bigger ones are Mommy and Daddy. It's a nice place to live. And when night falls, they swim to their little island and go to sleep. There's the night. There's Papa Mallard and Mama Mallard and the babies. Think that last one's in a hurry again. And that is Make Way for Ducklings. I hope you've enjoyed this book. Oh, there they are on the front cover. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Somebody's in a hurry again. All right, we'll see you again next time. Bye.